I'd like to invite onto stage the panelists for our next panel session. And this session is about addressing underserved needs, successful leaders involved in bridging urban/rural divides. And I would like to invite onto the stage Mr. Anshu Gupta, the founder and director of Gunj, of course popularly known as the clothing man, with a mission to make the clothing sector a matter of concern. Thank you. Please have a seat. Next up, Ms. Shukla Bose, the founder and CEO of Pan IIM Humanity Foundation, who of course has a rich corporate experience of 26 years in the hospitality industry, but left it all in 2000 to start a multinational NGO working with children. Ms. Shukla Bose. And finally, Ramji Raghavan, the chairman of Agastya Foundation, the world's largest hands-on mobile science education program for economically disadvantaged children and rural teachers. And this panel discussion will be chaired by Ms. Durreen Shahnaz. She's the chair, founder and chairperson of IIX Asia, a career, of course, spanning over 2 decades, and built a very good track record as a successful banker, media executive, and social entrepreneur.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is actually really good segue from last panel into this one. So we have an amazing group of people here on the stage. And I think it's really remarkable to see all these very successful IIM graduates here, especially because you represent, obviously, what's the best of India. And as recent studies also show, the fact that obviously India and China are now leaders in Asia and beyond, the reality is, there is actually a lot of still need in Asia. And the reality also is the fact that if the underserved are not part of the equation of the growth, that's where all the political instability, the social instability will come in, as we're seeing is happening in lots part of India already. And that's where everything we enjoy will go away. So I think this is a very good segue for us to sort of talk about that. And I think few things to sort of keep in mind as we're having this conversation with this very esteemed panel is the fact that we now in Asia, just to throw some numbers out there, have about 3.3 million millionaires. So that's an astounding figure. And what that means is there's an enormous amount of wealth to do a lot of social good. So I think this is our opportunity to do that. The way we're going to do the panel session today is the fact that talk about actually the spectrum which is there in terms of philanthropy, in terms of actually impact investing, and looking at the whole spectrum of how each one of you in the audience can be also involved in what's happening in terms of including the underserved in the equation of your work. So I think that's how we're going to do this. So the way they have it, I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing at IIX, and then we will sort of follow on with the rest of the speakers. So we will try to keep it within 6 to 7 minutes for each of the talks, so we actually have time for Q&A, which we didn't have in the last panel. So I know everyone has wonderful, exciting stories to say, but we will try to keep it in time. So I will start off, and then we'll kick it off from there. Okay. All right. So I guess I have to admit I'm actually not from India, but I'm actually from Bangladesh. But I guess, again, being a part of the subcontinent, I guess the biggest thing for me to represent here is I'm a Bengali. And as for those of you who are in the audience who are Bengalis, you know that that's something that we are extremely proud of, perhaps a little too much. So as someone who was growing up in Bangladesh after the war in '71, we had a lot of very intense Bengaliness, sort of put in us. And part of that, as being a woman, was the fact that We had to learn how to sing, of course, Tagore songs. That was part of it. We actually had to learn to be good wives for our potential husbands. And also, of course, carry the flag of a lot of our communist feelings that we have in Bengal in terms of, bringing the whole social side as a part of the equation. So the first two, I don't think I did very well, but the last one, I tried to embrace as much as I could. So very quickly, sort of my journey from Bangladesh, where it started and where it ended up, I was expected to basically be in Bangladesh, and my parents' dream was I will go to Lady Shri Ram in Delhi and come back and get married, but I did not follow their dreams, as many things that they asked me to do, and actually went to the US for my undergraduate. And from there on, I knew that was my journey of independence. And it was very interesting for someone who was brought up with a lot of the socialist views. My first job out of university was at Morgan Stanley in New York. And this was an amazing, amazing journey for me in the sense to see what the role of finance has in terms of really making the world go around. And this is, I'm talking about almost 20 years ago, where I basically used that knowledge to not stay in Wall Street, but actually move on and come back to Bangladesh and work for a small organization called Grameen Bank, which was giving loans to rural women to start up their business. So I think the rest of my career over the last 20 years pretty much follows that, which is really taking the power of media and finance and doing social good with it. So my first company was started back in 1999 after I had a very successful career in the corporate side. And that was to work with the rural women who were making artisan products. And really, it was a B2B business out of New York. I successfully grew it and sold it in 2004 to National Geographic. And from then on, it was a journey to really see the company that I had, which has an enormous, enormous social impact, but also was sustainable financially. How can I play a role in bringing more of these companies onto the forefront and really help them grow? And that was what led to the whole mission of creating the two companies that I created in the last few years. So this is my second and third company, IIX and Shujog. Now, the interesting thing is, what I'm going to talk a little bit about today, and the rest of the panelists will talk about, as I said, the different gradation, of the space of philanthropy. Where we are, it's not philanthropy, it's actually impact investing. And the organizations we work with are called social enterprises. So what are social enterprises? Social enterprises are mission-oriented for-profit companies or market-oriented not-for-profit. So it's immaterial whether you're a for-profit or a not-for-profit company, but what's important is the fact that you actually have financial viability and you actually have a social mission. So that's these companies, and they are now in numbers of thousands around the world. And if you look at it, it's very interesting. I always say when the investment banks get into the game, this is something that's serious and growing. JP Morgan, about 5 years ago, wrote a report on this space of social enterprises and impact investing and said, okay, what's the market size of this? With anything that's new, any sector that's new, you need to look at the market size. So what's the market size of this? And they actually came up with a number of 1 trillion. So there's apparently $1 trillion worth of demand out there for capital which wants to go into this sector. Now, that's interesting, but how does it get there, right? So this is where IIX and Shujog were created, the two organizations that I founded. So what they are is, with IIX, we basically focus on investment platforms where you come in and you can actually invest as an investor into these social enterprises, and I'll talk a little bit more detail about it, what it does. And Shujog, which is a Bengali word for opportunity, really focuses on research and doing the impact assessment. What sort of impact are these organizations having? How can you quantify it and put it next to basically the financial results? So those two are the focus of the organizations. Now, as we're doing this, of course, the question I'm sure in the audience, you're thinking, okay, great, but really, how much of this is really happening? A lot. And I think let's just look at India. Interestingly, if you see, there's a lot of work that's happening, obviously, in terms of the intermediation. We are playing a big role. There are other players out there in India who are also playing a big role in terms of making these investments happen. And then, interestingly, you see now there was the number, if you think about it, it actually is quite large. Apparently, about $260 million have been invested about the last 3 or 4 years in India in this sector. And one of the biggest players on the investment side has been Omidyar Network, which is, for those of you who know, Omidyar, he founded eBay. And he created a fund which actually invests. So we have here an opportunity to do social good in a very sustainable way. And I think this is something really powerful that is starting and happening in a global scale. Now, in terms of IIX, as I said, we have investment platforms. So we actually have 3 of them. We have Impact Incubator, where we actually work with organizations which are raising less than $200,000. We have an Impact Partners, which is a private placement platform, where we have now several hundred investors, and we also have, any given time, over $60 or $70 million worth of deals with incredible social impact, and we're raising capital for them. And the Impact Exchange, which, when it's launched in now 2 weeks' time, will be the first stock exchange in the world for social enterprises where their securities can be traded. So it's actually really, really exciting, because what's happening is an entire social capital markets, has been created. Now, in Shujog, as I said, we spend a lot of time in research and then also doing impact assessment of the organizations. And also we do a lot of advocacy, which is obviously a big part, of any sector to grow. To go a little bit more in detail on the Impact Partners, if you see how we sort of work on the deals, we have the organizations across Asia that we work with that come to us, we screen them. And then we have the investors who actually we screen as well, because we actually have investors who care about triple bottom line. And then we make the deals happen. Now, in terms of some of just a snapshot of some of the deals that we have closed, there's one in the Philippines for vocational training. It's about actually 180,000. It was 120 in the first round. We just closed subsequently another 80,000. And that's impacting about 700 youth who are at risk, and this is now growing about 4 times of the impact. And then in the energy side, we actually just closed convertible debt, about $300,000 worth, and this is in Cambodia, and again, this is impacting about 9,000 families. And then in inclusive finance in India, this is for the space between microfinance and commercial lending. We worked with an organization where it's about $1 million that was raised. And again, this was an interesting financial structuring where we did a special purpose vehicle funding, which is impacting about 4,000 families, which is really interesting. Now, what we have in the pipeline, there are many, but this is just to give you a flavor. Say in India, what are the deals out there that if you say, okay, I'm interested, what are the type of deals that you have? We have an organization in Jaipur, which is raising about $100,000, very small amount, and they're into distribution of actually energy efficient products, and this will impact about 100,000 families. There's a bioplant in Gujarat, which is raising up to $700,000, and it's going to impact about 700 families, 8,000 people. And in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu, we have rural artisans. There's a group for rural artisans who are working with them. They actually work with some of the big name companies that all of us know. They're raising about $500,000 and impacting about 4,500 families. And of course, all of this, the exciting part is soon we will be able to even trade these securities where the investments are going in through Impact Exchange. Our reach is across Asia and Africa as soon as we have the exchange up, because it will be for both Asia and Africa. And we have investors from all over the world, but mostly from Asia, which is actually a really good sign, given the fact that we Asians have the power to actually make a sustainable difference, in Asia. We actually have our big, year-long, we have an advocacy thing, which is an impact forum, which is happening in June. So if you're in town, we welcome you. But I think what's really interesting is the fact that, once again, this whole impact investing space is something that has gone off, and it is basically now moving in a very rapid pace. And it'll be fantastic to get some more involvement from all of us, who are now in the place to be involved in. So from me, I'm actually going to move on to my colleague here. Ranji, do you want to take on? Sure. To talk about this?
What makes you creative or innovative or a great problem solver? Is it something in your genes or a skill that you've learned? On a hot summer's day in rural India, about 2 hours by road from Bangalore, 2 village girls, Rani and Roja, sat under a tree to escape the sun. Sensible thing to do in the Indian summer, right? Rani looked at Roja and asked, Roja, do you ever wonder why you feel cool or cooler sitting in the shade of a tree? And Roja thought for a second and said, well, yeah, I guess it must have something to do with the fact that the leaves and branches of the tree are shielding us from the sun. And the girls continued talking until the aha question popped out. Would different leaves have different cooling effects? And that question, not surprisingly, led to a project titled The Cooling Effect of Leaves. And 9 months later, working with instructors from the Agastya Foundation, the girls won a prestigious Intel Iris National Science Award, competing with the best and brightest kids from across India's top schools. Now, what does this story tell you? I think it tells you the value of curiosity, the spirit of inquiry, the magic of wonder, the power of passion, staying with a problem. In fact, Einstein attributed his great insights to curiosity, obsession, and dogged endurance. The mission of Agastya, the foundation that I head, is to spark curiosity and nurture creativity in economically disadvantaged kids and government school teachers across India. And the way we're doing this is with 70 mobile science labs, 30 science centers, and a 200-acre campus we call our Creativity Lab, located about 2 hours by road from Bangalore, touching over 1 million children a year through hands-on science, mostly, learning that is fun, accessible, and useful, and very experiential. Why hands-on? Because cognitive scientists tell us that the average human brain, which is not the average here, by the way, retains 5% of a lecture, 10% of what you read, 50% of what you see and hear, 70% of what you discuss with someone, assuming that discussion is useful, valuable, 80% of what you personally experience, good or bad, and over 90% of what you teach to others. So at Agastya, when I came back 12 years ago to India, I got people together, including the former chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, Dr. P.K. Iyengar, a whole bunch of school kids, college kids, and we asked questions like, is it possible to raise this creative speed limit of a country? And Iyengar told me how the atom bomb was built. And he said, Ramji, this was a great success, but the biggest failure India had, and perhaps still has, was in not being able to disseminate the creative temper, the scientific temper, to the masses of India. So if we can come up with a way of doing that, then I think we'll create transformation. So that's what we've been embarked on for the last 10, 12 years. I'm a former banker, I'm not a scientist, so don't ask me any questions on science. Having said that, and given the lack of time, we'll now move over to a short film, Seeing is Believing. Thank you.
While scientists, artists, and other visitors instruct the teachers and children, some of the children are also selected for the Young Instructor Leader program. Children are selected to be young instructors when they show special interest and skill. Agastya also reaches communities through science fairs which come into town with all the excitement of a travelling circus. For a few days, young instructors demonstrate low-cost experiments and elaborate models to children from the local schools. Integrated learning, art, dance, as well as science and math are taught on the campus. This engages the child's mind and body so that science and math come alive in new and different ways. Mobile labs visit rural villages after dark and whole families gather at a central location, often illuminated only by the lanterns the vans carry. Communities learn about the importance of ecology, the value of Ayurvedic plants, and other lessons useful in their lives. As the spirit of Agastya spreads throughout the country and around the world, it is bringing the rural poor to the table as India makes her mark on the global scene.